Without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker for tonight. So he is a 35-year veteran of Silicon Valley product management, including 6 startups. He's a smoke jumper, product executive, parachuting into software companies to run product teams on an interim basis when he's not coaching product leaders or helping design product organizations. He founded Product Camp, a fantastic community. He's been involved in software product management since 2002, and his Art of Product Management was one of the first books on the subject. I personally had the pleasure of meeting him when he came to Workday a few years ago, so it's a privilege to be able to see and hear from him again today.
Great, thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, delighted to introduce Rich Mironoff.
Wonderful. Thanks for letting me join remotely, and with an apology, because almost every year over the last 10 years I've come to Dublin for my annual trip to what used to be called DIT and is now TU Dublin to do some teaching there. And little things like COVID got in the way this time. So I'm hoping that 2022 I'll be back in Dublin in May as per usual and see everybody in person. So great, thanks for that. So if we can, great, we got slides up. And let me sort of frame this up before we get too far into it. I'm going to be pulling apart two things that a lot of folks tend to put together. One is how product management adds value, and the other is how developer or maker teams build the right things and do a good job of creating the technology that we're building. And it's really important, I think, because often what we find at the executive level, particularly on the go-to-market side, folks have the impression that product managers are really about whipping the development team harder to make things happen faster. And we're going to try to unpack that rather dramatically. The other thing, just to look ahead, I'm going to be talking some about halfway through about product owners versus product managers. I want everybody to know that I love folks who do product work, whatever their title is. We're going to be focused on what these folks do as opposed to what we call them, but I'm going to lean on the product owner definition that comes out of the Scrum book as an example of not the right way to do things. So that's our topic for the day. Let's jump ahead. As David said, this is me. I've been doing software product management since the 1980s. So for anybody who thought this is a new thing, not so much, right? And I'm going to emphasize product here because there's a lot of confusion with project or program. These days, as you heard, I'm a smoke jumper VP of product. That means I sometimes pop into companies to run their whole product team when no one else is doing that, and then hire in my replacement behind it. The key question I'm always asking of all of my clients is, what do our customers want and will they pay for it? Notice that's not the question of what do our salespeople say customers want or what do our executives say customers want. This is all going to be about figuring out what customers really do want. 6 startups, 4 of those we file under good life learning and character building because there was nothing else that useful came out of it. And then just some dates for fun, right? So I started my blog in 2002. Anybody who said they have a blog before 2001 is lying because they didn't exist. I joined the Agile movement in 2005. I think of myself as an Agilist, and the book was out in 2008. Anybody who's been following the blog knows that I've now got 20 years of posts up there. They're all free. Please help yourself. Okay, so what's our agenda? First thing we're going to do, we're going to take a sort of careful look at what product managers actually do and how we add value. That's a way to prep ourselves for the what do product owners do discussion. And then we're going to take Agile apart a little bit. And again, definitionally, I'm going to talk about Agile in the broad sense. We're going to use Scrum as the sort of standard operating procedure that many of us have. But honestly, I'm indifferent. If you're doing Kanban or XP or you've rolled your own, we'll talk about what makes you Agile. It's not Scrum. So we're going to try to keep ourselves above the level of tooling. Honestly, I'm happy for my development teams or my maker teams to use whatever processes they want, as long as it gets us good results. Okay, we'll take apart product owners. Well, not the people, the concept, and then we'll have some takeaways. And I'm hoping at the end we'll have time for Q&A. If you have an urgent question or something really important, do drop it into wherever the Q&A is, and we might interrupt. Okay. Launching ahead. What does a product manager do? And with apologies, that's an American reference to the American president, Harry Truman, who said the buck stops here. Important to remember that we as product managers have no authority. All we have is responsibility. Lots of things we have to get done, and we have to figure out how to get other folks to help us do them. If we're in the software business or the tech business, so if we're building software for commercial revenue direct, what do? We have to drive as product managers not just delivery, which is typically around dates, but we have to drive market acceptance of whole products. That means if we build things that don't work, or that people don't want, or that they don't like, we fail. It's not enough as product managers to talk about delivery dates and pat ourselves on the back for successfully hitting some target. Next thing down, we as product managers need to always think about market segments or groups or herds or sectors or whatever else we want to call the groups of people who are more than just a single individual customer. If our company's building custom bespoke work for individual customers, we're really in the professional services business. I would tell us we're not in the product business. And I'm going to, again, try to steer us away from that. We as product managers have to think a lot about defining and measuring success, because otherwise somebody not us is going to do that, and they're going to do that in a not so helpful way. And then, no surprise here, every company I've ever worked with, every company I've ever been an employee of has had too many things to do. Come drop me a note afterwards if your development and maker team has idle cycles and they don't have enough in the backlog. I've never seen it in 40 years in the business. So we know as product management folks, there will always, 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 always be competing priorities and the need to say no to 90 or 95% of all the requests, because there will just never be enough. Okay, so some of you may in fact be working on internal development where your company is absorbing that yourself. If you're an airline or a bank or a government agency, you're doing development probably for internal use. So just a small change there. Many of the same things. I'm going to assume that funding may not line up with needs, may not line up with organizations. So we have to make sure that what we do is actually going to be useful. So not enough to get a project funded or a piece of work funded. We have to think about getting the end users to adopt it, to use it, and to have some business outcome. If we build a new system for internal use and it doesn't save us money or make us money or make our customers measurably happier, it's probably waste, right? And then, of course, always, always, there will always be too much to do, too many priorities, too many projects, too many, demands. And so we as product folks are going to be faced with doing the 10 or 15% that actually matters instead of the 80% that's wasted. Okay, let's keep going. I'm going to put this in a chart form. This chart is probably maybe 15 years old. Anybody who's been in a workshop or class with me has seen it, so apologies in advance. But I built this for a bunch of engineers I worked with decades ago because they couldn't understand what we did. So notice I put product management in the middle, not at the top, because nobody works for us. And I've identified 3 separate groups here that really don't, actually 4 that don't overlap. And we're going to start on the left side. And I used to call these development teams or engineers, but we left everybody out. So I'm going to call them makers. And the makers include developers, designers, DevOps folks, test engineers, architects, anybody else who's actually putting together pieces or working on the design of our products, right? And what do those makers want from us? Now, if we were live, by the way, I'd ask this as a quiz question and give books away to whoever gives me the right answer, but we're going to keep rolling. Okay, so what is it that we expect to give to our maker team? What's the input, right? Long list of things. Notice I started with some of the important C's, context and conversations. And I put all the Agile assets at the end, user stories, backlogs, personas, epics, because I care less about those. What's really important here is that we as product managers bring in our maker team as equals. We're not going to write down perfect user stories, give it to them, and have them do just what we say, because that's a total waste. Notice that I've given this a 2-sided arrow. Something that you may or may not know, but there's proof for it. Every single one of your developers believes they're smarter than you if you're a product manager. How do we know? Because we ask them, right? Now, they may or may not be smarter, but if we're not bringing their brains in, we're leaving all the smarts outside. So what's important here is this is a collaborative piece of work where we and our designers and developers and DevOps and everybody else figure it out together. And we start with context and conversations and problem statements, because what's important is that they understand the problem space. In fact, we're going to see they're involved in that too. Now, what do we get back from our makers on a really good day with our fingers crossed and the wind at our backs? I'll call them product bits. Now, it's not product. It's just the technical pieces of product. We'll see in a moment, there's a whole different set of deliverables that might turn this into product. Okay, so we've done the maker side or the developer engineer side. That was easy. The next group here is marketing and sales. Now, notice that I've carefully divided our employees in marketing and sales from the actual outside people who use our products and pay for them. I'm assuming a commercial model here, because our marketing and sales people are not our customers. Our customers are our customers, and they pay us money, right? Our marketing and sales people like to be halfway in between. So what is it that marketing and sales looks for, right? Here's a list of things, and I started with the phrase sellable stories. That's a play on user stories. A sellable story is a bunch of words that we write down for our salespeople so that when they repeat them to customers, customers are excited about buying our products and giving us money, right? So we have stories, we have segmentation, we have messages, feature benefit, pricing. By the way, if your sales team is creating pricing for themselves, you're in a world of hurt. Come see me after class, right? Demos. And notice that the things on the right side, there's no one-to-one match. There's no identical item on the right and the left side here. We, as product managers, are actually translating the technical details of what we're building into the sellable stories that our marketing and sales team needs to get folks excited about looking at and trying our products. Okay, what do we get back? Again, normally I'd do this as a quiz if we were in person, but we can't. What I mostly expect to get back to product management from marketing and sales is, I'll politely call it input and feedback, big quotes. Mostly it's complaints, right? If you've ever interviewed a sales rep and asked the following questions: what's the number one reason we closed good big deals this quarter? And what are the 2 reasons we lost deals this quarter? I can guarantee you in 90+% of the cases, what we'll learn is that we close deals because we have great salespeople. End of story. And we lost deals because either we were missing some features or the price was too high, uniformly. So when we talk to our sales team about how to improve our products, we almost always learn things that are not so helpful. One is that they're great salespeople. Good to know. And the other is we should add hundreds more features and lower our price. Not so useful. Okay, so therefore the most important arrow we're going to draw is this one. And it connects product managers directly with the real users and buyers of our products. When I parachute into a company, as I do on occasion as the head of product, and I get each of the folks in my new department a chance to talk with me, and we meet and we catch up and we get introduced, one of the very first questions I ask them is, how many customers did you talk to directly yourself in the last 3 weeks that was not a sales call? And, the good ones tell me several, 2, 3, 4. Some of them are embarrassed and they tell us that they're not allowed to talk to customers, in which case it's my job to fix that. But there's a third group. There's folks who are in the product role, aren't talking to customers, aren't embarrassed about it, and don't know they should. And pretty quickly, either they're going to change their point of view or I'm going to give them a promotion in the first few weeks to some other department than product management, because if you're not excited about talking to customers, I can't have you on my team, right? So direct. This is going to be the theme for the next 40 minutes or so. Okay, executives, most companies have executives. What do they want from us? They want revenue forecasts, they want roadmaps, they want commitments, they want strategy. And all of these need to be denominated in money. I don't know if it's euros or dollars or, British pounds, yen, whatever they are. If we're talking to our executives and we're not talking about money and we're not denominating our revenue forecasts and commitments and roadmaps in money, we really don't have their attention. So lastly, what do we get back from our executives? Well, we get permission to hire people. We get budgets for product. We get the targets that we put up as revenue. We usually move forward a quarter or two, right? Now, notice before we leave this, that as product managers, we have to be trilingual. We have to speak enough developer or maker that all those smart folks don't lock us out of the room, laugh at us, and throw away all our documents. We have to speak enough end user, customer, that we can really figure out what's going on and what they need and what they want. And we have to speak enough back of the envelope financials, money, that we can explain to executives in very short sentences with very few words how the things we're going to do are going to lead to revenue. Good. We're going to come back to this a few times, but this is the essential thing for me. If you're doing only 1/3 of this or 2/3 of this, you've got work to do. Okay, let's keep going. All right. Many of you know about the good idea train. Here it is. If you're in product, the good idea train pulls up in front of your email account, Slack client, screen, Post-it note wall, whatever. All through the day, everybody at your company and everyone who uses your product and everyone who doesn't use your product is bringing ideas to you. And they wouldn't bring you those ideas if they didn't think they were good. So every single person in the universe is going to give you just one good idea today, which means this stack of things as high as the sky is going to keep arriving. By the way, when you're talking to folks on the sales side, they tend to universalize these. And instead of saying big customer X wants us to do this, you'll generally hear that everyone wants it. So be skeptical, be suspicious, and know, as we said before, you're going to have to turn down 90, 95, 97% of all of these requests because your engineering team is already up to the ceiling, up to the rafters with work to do. So don't feel bad. It's part of your job. Get used to the idea that you need 50 different ways of thanking people for their wonderful ideas, but not committing to do them. Okay, let's keep going a little bit more about product management before we get into the Agile portion. And this is an old picture, but anybody who's following US politics knows that it's a complete steaming mess, right? So product management will always, always, always be a political issue as well as a technical issue. Your spreadsheets will never solve this problem because, as we know, engineering demand is always 2x, 5x, 20x, 90x more than engineering can ever, 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 ever build. And people are offended when they discover this or they think you're lying. Okay, so as product managers, we have to deal in exclusive or trade-offs. By the way, that's engineering talk. An exclusive or trade-off is where we say, that's a good idea. We could do that if we cancel or delete or delay these other three things. That's an exclusive or trade-off. Remember, your executives only want you to make and decisions. Oh yeah, we'll do everything in the roadmap. And that new thing you just asked for, no worries, somehow we'll get it all done. As product managers, we live in the exclusive or universe, okay? And our stakeholders pretty uniformly don't agree. Sales wants more features. Engineering wants more work on tech debt and architecture. Support or customer success wants us to fix more bugs that nobody's supposed to know about, right? Our finance folks want us to raise prices. Our renewal team wants us to lower prices. Every single group brings to us their own list, and we have to adjudicate, we have to choose, we have to sort in a way that still gets things done, right? And our goal isn't to make everybody happy. Our goal is to have a healthy product, to have real end users love our product, and to bring in the money we need to bring in, right? So we are always, always balancing between different stakeholders, different demands, and different limitations. Okay, why does this matter? So I'll put myself up and then a famous European next, right? So here's the thought. Product management is responsible for building the right things. And it's a product management failure if we brilliantly engineer a product that doesn't sell, or a feature that nobody uses, or a product that doesn't deliver improvement, or some tech debt reduction that doesn't make our engineering team go faster, right? We are in charge of making the final call on what's going to have value, not how fast it's going to get built, not how well it's going to get tested mostly. So the failure for product management is when we build something and ship it on time and the world doesn't notice and it doesn't matter, right? So that's the failure, not did we whip the engineering team harder, right? Somebody smarter than me said it a nicer way, right? Our customers are experts in what they want to achieve, not how to achieve it. So when our customers give us a spec or a ticket or a demand, or even more when our enterprise sales team writes down what they think the customer wants, we on the product side need to be deeply skeptical, because we're going to have to go back to those folks and validate that they understood our problem, that they proposed a better solution. They usually don't understand our architecture, our limitations, our business model. So we want to be very, very careful that we don't just take tickets. We don't take requests. What we do is we identify problems that customers have. And then we and our team together, because remember, they're all the smart folks, we and our team together figure out different ways we might solve that so that we can get real value out of their work, right? We don't want to have them work really hard and have it not lead anywhere. Okay, let's take a breath because we're finally going to talk about Agile. Here we go. Okay, so next topic, development as the inner loop. I've borrowed some pictures here that you guys may see as very familiar, and I do it with love and acknowledgement. Let's tell the Agile story as the way we make things, not the way we choose what to make, right? So here's a picture. It's from Mike Cohen. It's copyrighted 2005, but I know he was working on it way earlier than that. So this is his classic Scrum picture, right? You got product backlogs, you got sprint backlogs, daily Scrum meetings, and potentially shippable increments. Notice this is really an engineering manufacturing diagram. This is how we build these things in 1 week or 2 week or 4 week sprints or whatever it is, and we have our daily meetings. It doesn't address the why, and it doesn't address customer value from a customer's point of view. So we're going to layer product management around this and call ourselves the outer loop. By the way, that's a development joke for anybody who's a developer, right? So the outer loop on the left side, before we start a project, a product, a new release, a major feature, we should, as product folks, be thinking about the inputs. What do customers want? What do markets need? Does it support our business model? Do we have a strategy? How does it trade off against the other work we have? Is it funded? Notice these should all be questions that we can answer before we start spending our next €1 million building something and finding out at the end it wasn't so useful. And at the other end, because it's not sufficient just to ship software, right? At the other end, we have to be thinking about how customers are going to get it and how we're going to market and sell it. What are the benefits? Do we need ways to demonstrate ROI? How do we get folks onboarded, et cetera? Are we going to end of life something old to make something new? Again, the Scrum process or the broader Agile process doesn't address how customers are going to get value. It only addresses building the thing that we hope to turn into value, right? So product management, we've wrapped around Scrum or whatever process you're going to take here, right? So let's keep going. And because I'm differentiating Scrum from Agile for a minute, let's talk about my markers for a good Agile organization. Because I don't actually care whether my team runs Scrum or Kanban or XP or whatever homegrown thing they like to do. In fact, what I see is really good teams, they migrate, they evolve, and most of the well-established long-term teams aren't doing anything that I can recognize as out of anybody's book, right? I'm happy there because they're building the processes that are going to make them happy and me happy. So what are my markers? Right? And we'll just go through these one at a time. The first most important one is we have a stable development or maker team. We don't swap, we don't trade, we don't throw folks into customer projects without notice, right? And we tie those teams to something that customers value. Maybe you're working on the admin portion of your application. Maybe you're working on the customer onboarding. Maybe it's the end user workflows, right? But we as teams work on stuff that real customers value. If we can't name the people who it's for, probably broken, okay? And I said this, but I'll say it again. Product managers and the whole team or some portion of the team. We invite developers and designers into our interview calls. We share notes. I don't generally let them talk directly in those calls. I have them write me a post-it or a text or a Slack message so we can manage the interview. But we as a team listen to and learn directly from our real end users, not proxies, right? For me, proxies is a 4-letter word, even though it has 7 letters in it, right? My team works on problems as well as solutions. If we're giving that team the answer, we probably gave them the wrong one, right? Our objectives aren't just delivery dates, they're user behavior change. If we improve the workflow, we can get more folks through the sign-up funnel. If we simplify the administration pages and have better reports, we'll run more reports and our customers will give us higher NPS scores. If we retire a bunch of tech debt and bad architecture, we can build products faster, right? Behavioral changes are things we can measure instead of just saying we hit the date. Okay, frequent process retrospectives. My team and I change and improve and experiment with our processes, our tools, whatever. The company doesn't tell us how to do work. We decide how to do work and we change it when we need to. Last few here, there's an automated test suite. Anybody in the world who's doing only manual testing is throwing money down the drain, right? Automated testing for me is one of the hallmarks of truly agile development because it means we can ship every day, every hour. If we're doing manual testing, we're probably limited to 2 weeks of offshoring, right? So, and everybody writes tests instead of having some second-class citizens that we call test writers. Everybody on the team writes tests. Everybody on the team inspects code. Everybody worries. And all of that requires this big word here, trust. Some people call it psychological safety, right? So if we're going to have well-functioning teams, we stay together, we trust each other, we have our backs, we let each smart person do the things they're good at, we help each other, we coach each other, we collaborate, right? That's what Agile's about. Now, if it's Scrum, that's fine. Okay, so having done that, let's keep going. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about product managers and product owners. And again, with apologies, when I talk about product owners, I'm talking about the very narrow definition of what we find in the Scrum book. I know that a lot of product owners out there do the thing I've described as product management, and I love them for it, right? So we're going to take apart the work instead of the title, but I'm going to call it product owner just so we have a handle for it, right? If you're doing the full job, I'll call you a product manager and try to get you a 20% raise. Okay, so here's another picture of the generic Scrum cycle I built at one point, right? So what's the first thing we do? The first thing we do in a Scrum cycle is we have a charter for our project. We figure out what problem we're solving, who it's for, why it matters. We do a bunch of homework before we start development, right? We don't wander through development and hope we're going to find something that customers want. We do our darn homework first. And at the end of the charter, generally, we'll get together the team, if there's a team yet, and we'll put together a product backlog. And this, by the way, is all the hopes and dreams for all eternity for this product. We're not going to do we're going to do the tiny fraction of these, but we're going to build a really big product backlog. We're going to love it. We're not going to get too enamored of which things first. Okay, then we discover that's too much for a release. So we do release planning, what's in V1, what's in V1.1. And then we're going to build a release backlog, which is still too big, right? We made choices. We threw out most of the backlog. Now we're really ready to start developing, right? So we're going to do some sprint planning maybe, and that's going to lead to a sprint backlog and some user stories. We're going to have a daily stand-up, right? We're going to accept stories and have them be done. A good marker of quality agile is we have a clear definition of done, right? Review, retrospectives. We're going to adjust our processes some, and we're going to end up with a stack of potentially releasable software. By the way, the only difference between potentially releasable and releasable is that a product manager blessed it and said it could go out, right? We do a bunch of sprints, and at some point, we as product managers get to decide how much or all of the potentially releasable software goes to customers, right? And I'm doing this again in great detail because I'm going to break this in half. And I'm going to tell you that, we do a release retrospective. Okay, that if you look at the very, very narrowest Scrum owner view, right, It's this. It's the inner workings. It's the cycle. It's the sprint planning. It's heads down. And it's really, really, really important that we do that work, right? But back to first principles here. Product owners generally are either disempowered, not allowed, not asked, or don't volunteer to do the strategic work that wraps around this to make sure we're actually going to build a thing that customers value and pay us for, right? So the other part of this, in organizations that have product owners, often we have a separate role called product manager that does the outward stuff and doesn't do the inward stuff. And this is a weird situation because it means the product managers probably don't know a lot about how things are built, don't know the team, don't appreciate the difficulties and barriers to getting stuff done, but they do know the customers and they do know the markets. And the product owners know all the inside stuff, but don't know the customers, don't know the markets, don't know the politics and how we're going to sell things, which makes it really, really hard for either of these folks to prioritize the backlog, because the outer product manager doesn't really know how hard anything is, and the inner product owner doesn't really have clear value assessments, and they have to put themselves together. Sometimes we call this two in a box, right? So if I come back to the previous diagram I used, right? So if this is what a product manager does, or a product owner, if you're doing the whole product manager job, again, I love it, regardless of what you call yourself, what your badge says. If we draw this same chart and we take the narrow small p product owner definition from the Scrum book, here's what we get. We get stories, we get team level priorities, we get a backlog nicely groomed and managed, and we get software bits back. But there's nothing to inform this as to what marketing and sales needs, what real customers need, how executives make decisions about allocating resources. The Scrum product owner, in the narrowest sense, is really part of the maker team and not part of the external product team, which frustrates me because we're not getting stuff built. We're not building the right things, even if we're building those things correctly. So just wrapping that thought up here. Here's a handoff. I don't know if this was from the Japan Olympics or not, but every handoff between one person in your company and the next, where one person tells somebody else what they heard a customer say, is for me a loss of context and a failure. So again, I'll say proxies is a 4-letter word. It appears all through the Scrum literature, and I hate it, and I refuse to have anything to do with it. Okay, so we know that specs are always incomplete. They're always partly incorrect. When a customer tells us what to do, they generally didn't get it right. And every second, third, fourth hand source of information, if you are reading the comments that your sales reps wrote into Salesforce, you're getting a very, very skewed, limited view of what they care about, not what you care about, right? We lose context, we have lots of assumptions, and we end up in this place where user stories, instead of being conversations, become demands, right? Where we write a user story and we tell people to do exactly what's in the user story without thinking that clearly, okay? So I'm trying to get away from this problem regardless of what we call folks, right? So, and the most important thing, and I'm going to bring back this other chart for a moment here as I bring my cat up, because my cat really wants to join the meetup, right? So when I look back at my product failures, here's where I see most product failures happen, right? Long before we put any engineers or designers on the project, on the product, on the team, we made a bunch of terrible assumptions about what users want, about what the market needs, what people will pay for, competition, how we're going to distribute. So the fundamental product management failures I see happen right here. And a lot of agile teams skip over the homework. They skip over the market analysis. They skip over the research and discovery because they want to get to coding. They think that's the fastest route. What I observe over and over again is that if we do this wrong, this entire cycle is going to be wasted and thrown away. We're going to spend 2 million euros building the wrong thing instead of 3 weeks and 25,000 euros confirming or maybe disconfirming what we thought we knew, right? So important that we do our upfront work. We're welcome to be wrong, but we want to be mostly right So when we come into the development cycle, we can actually be within 10 or 20% of what the world wants. Okay, let's keep going. So just to reiterate, and this isn't a knock on anybody's title, but when I look at the Scrum defined product owner, I think it's a job set up to fail, and here's why. Certainly, we know that product owners are going to write and accept stories, and they're going to prioritize backlogs. Although how they do that without talking to real customers directly, I'm not sure, right? And almost every Scrum book tells you that the product owner must be available to the team at every moment, 24/7. So I'm scratching my head here. In a pre-COVID or post-COVID world, I always send my product managers out on the road for a week or two to spend lots of time with customers. Don't know how they do that, right? Because here's the things we are getting instead, right? We're getting proxies and stakeholders telling us what we need, not end users. There's really no time or reward within the classic Scrum model for doing end user discovery. Generally, there's some magic here where we imagine or pretend that someone outside the Scrum cycle told us what to build and it was right. And again, that's where I see most product failures happen. There's a real focus on product level, on team level productivity, which I think is great. But customers don't pay us for velocity. Customers pay us for delivering the features they really want. And if we spend our velocity and tough engineering on things that customers don't care about as much, then we've wasted all that velocity. And then last thing here, which really pains me, most of the time in most organizations, we don't assign a product owner until after all the important decisions have been made. We funded the project, we figured out who it's for, we've scheduled it, there's a date, there's high-level specs, right? And then we assign a product owner. How are we expecting that person to deliver great things, wonderfulness, joy, if we've, first of all, answered all the questions and then answered half of them wrong? So really important that it's not that I think somebody in a product owner job isn't doing a good job. It's that I think we've set those folks up to not be as successful as they could be if we open up the aperture here a little bit. Okay, we're almost ready to wrap here. So product owner for me, it's a part of a job. So whenever I take over a product team, every single person on the product management team is going to spend about half their time doing the things we've described as product owner. They're going to get a team, they're going to write stories or whatever the equivalent is, they're going to accept work, they're going to work through all the things, right? But it's not the full job. Half the job is facing outward for every single person to the markets, to the sales and marketing teams, to the competition, to the customers and end users. Every single person on my team who has a product title is doing part-time product owner and part-time product discovery. Really important. And that's how we get rid of handoffs, and that's how we build quality, and that's how we deliver against business objectives. Okay, so in my organizations, and I said it already, product owner is half of a job, right? It's an important half, it's a vital half, and we share that long-term success of building great products with one development team, right? Discovery is the other half, jobs to be done, learning, whatever you want to call it. Again, I don't like to get philosophical about this, but if you're not talking to at least one end user a week on a serious interview, you're not doing your job. And I'll come back to that question in a minute about user research and BAs, because I want to get to conclusions first. All right. And every product manager manages the overwhelming demand, right? There is always too much to do by a factor of 20. And we have to help our companies do the right things so that our maker or development team can then build them in the right way. Okay, we'll take a breath. We'll do some takeaways, and then I'll answer questions, starting with that one about user researchers and BAs. Okay, so here's my takeaways. In case anybody doesn't recognize it, that's a takeaway container in the corner, right? So product management focus on building the right things, right? We think about real end user value. That's in terms of revenue. That's in terms of activity or engagement or NPS score or renewals or people picking up the new functions that we are shipping, the new capabilities, right? And we're going to have to focus on value, knowing that there's always going to be conflicts, right? And we measure ourselves not on delivery dates, but on outcomes, because if we hit the dates and nobody cares, nobody shows up, it's a failure, okay? Agile and either maker teams, developer teams, engineering teams, whatever you want to call them, they really focus on building things correctly, building things well, building things with quality, building things fast if we can, right? And they're going to assume that we're mostly right on the product side about metrics, about audiences, about strategies. And we're going to shift priorities, of course, as we learn things, but it's our job on the product side to keep the backlog pretty stable so we can get work done. We've all been in teams where every 2.5 hours, the CEO or the managing director comes down with a new priority, and we throw it all up in the air and start again. We have to be the buffers for our team to make sure we can actually get work done so they can build the things right, and we can get them to build the right things, right? Biggest source of waste, working on stuff that doesn't matter, that nobody cares about, that's low value, right? On the engineering side, there's lots of waste other ways. That's not the product problem. And then finally, we talked about this, right? We, as a team, product managers and developers and designers and everybody else, right? We work together as a team. We take success as a team. We have rewards as a team to build great software. Okay, so I'm going to just show you, here's how to find me, in case anybody didn't know. Cleverly, my name, my email address, my Twitter handle, my LinkedIn are all the same. That's one of my office managers there. Good. So I'm going to stop the screen share here, and then we're going to take some questions. Okay. Dave, do you want to drive?
Yes. And first of all, thanks so much, Rich, for a great talk. It's such a big topic. I know I hear this topic every day in terms of the difference between product owners and product managers. So it's sparked a bit of discussion in our chat and our questions
I hope
as well.
so. I just have to say it again. I don't actually care what we call people. I care what they do. And in general, when I see product owners, I see them taking a very narrow role, and that's what I object to. Right? Honestly, titles don't matter to me.
Excellent. Okay, so Rich, we'll get going with the questions.
Right.
So again, folks, if you do have a question, please post them in the Q&A panel. I'm going to start with what we have there so far. I see one from Margaret Deering. Margaret, great to see you again. So Margaret was asking, one team, one backlog, 2 product streams. Any tips for prioritizing, measuring value to help make sure we prioritize well?
Our first choice is to not find ourselves in this situation if we can, because it's not where you want to be, right? And I'll say that this is a strategy problem. I haven't seen this problem solved by tools. I don't care if we're doing RICE or cost of delay or whatever else, right? Those tend to be technical solutions that assume that we actually can compute those things and that we know the outcomes, right? And generally, it's not the case. What I usually see in this situation is we have 2 different sets of consumers or executives or organizations that are pushing the same team for different stuff. And so we've got to go back to first principles. We've got to go back to strategy and ask, are they equivalently important product streams? Can we, for instance, allocate, maybe it's a 70-30 split here. And what we allocate is that product stream number 1 gets roughly 70% of our attention, and product stream 2 gets roughly 30% of our attention, right? Or some scheme, because otherwise what will happen is our stakeholders will endlessly lobby us and our bosses and our CEO or managing director so that each of those product streams tries to claim at least 100% of our work. Right? So this is an awkward problem because we're serving 2 masters or 2 markets or 2 audiences. So for instance, we might say our current customer base, where all of our current revenue comes from, is 80%, but we need to open up another new market which has new requirements. We won't see money for that for 2 more years, but we're willing to put 20 or 25% of our effort into that new market or product, right? Notice I'm making a choice at the high level, not at the ticket level, because we can't do this at the ticket level. Now that we know that 70 or 75% is for our current customer base, current product, current audience, now we can apply whatever tools we like, RICE or RACI or something. I don't particularly like weighted shortest job first, because that tends to ignore value, right? That assumes all the work is the same, right? But I have a bunch of pie charts, and we didn't do them here, but anybody who wants can go find pie charts on my site, or I'll send them a link, where, for instance, I usually expect we'll spend half of our story points or strawberries or engineer weeks on visible features, and most of the rest on discovery and infrastructure, right? We have to have a way to do that so that the sales team doesn't steal all of our infrastructure and tech debt work and bug fixes just this once for just this quarter, which they do every quarter. So this is about breaking it down, usually by audience or by strategy, before we get wading into the tickets. Okay, I hope that was useful. Go.
That's great. So thank you for the question, Margaret. Next question from Yusuf. Do you work with user researchers and BAs on your projects?
This is going to be controversial here. Now, let me back up by saying almost all my work is with companies that build software as their product. They're software companies, as opposed to companies that have an IT organization that's doing internal work, right? And in the software as a product companies, where if we don't build great software, we all lose our jobs and have to work somewhere else and dust off our CVs, I generally don't have BAs. I charge my product managers with knowing the things that BAs have to know and dividing up the work so that a product manager is doing BA work, is doing product owner work, and is doing discovery work, right? Because every time we bring in another person, we've got to do all the handoffs. Now, user researchers, I think, is a different game. Sometimes our product and design teams don't know how to do good research. I'm a fan of bringing in user researchers to teach my team how to do good research, right? So I expect my product managers, in partnership with my design team, to do all the sort of feature level, sub-product level research. Often the outside researchers are doing market level stuff, which is strategy. Sometimes we need researchers because we just have a gap, or we don't know how to do it, or for some reason it's not available. But I push my product managers and designers really, really hard to do their own research. And maybe we need tutorials or guidance or mentors or somebody to do it for us the first 4 times.
Okay, thanks, Rich.
Okay.
Maybe just to build on that, maybe just a follow-up question.
Please.
In terms of, you mentioned, Rich, in terms of bringing the engineers, the testers, the whole team into research. Any advice for any leaders in terms of, because sometimes the pushback we hear is, it's going to take away from their coding.
Yeah. So I generally find that's an excuse that we can knock down with some real experience, right? So I believe that most of my developers and most of the developers I know are desperately hungry to hear a real end user talk about a real problem instead of hearing what some product manager heard from a marketing person, heard from a salesperson, right? Our developers and designers, they're not mercenaries, to borrow Marty's phrase. They're missionaries, right? We come to work every day to know that real users are really using our product to solve real problems and bring them joy, right? And developers who don't care about that, I worry about. But we can't have 18 people on a call. So usually what I'd say is, I, as a product manager, I'm going to set up one call, maybe 2 calls a week, and I'm going to rotate through my development team, my maker team, and I'm going to ask everybody on my maker team to spend 1 hour every 3 weeks really listening directly to customers. What do they say, right? And I find, and a side benefit here, so developers hear things differently from designers, hear differently from product managers. And if we have one designer and one developer on the call, they're really smart about prompting me for questions we should ask, right? I learn more when they're on the call, and they finally hear real end users talk about real problems, and that motivates everybody. Endlessly, I see some developer who comes out of that call and stays up all night coding up a solution to something that we thought was hard because they're so embarrassed that it didn't work, right? And they're so smart, and we applaud them and we tell them they're smart, and it's great, right? You got to work with your own team and figure it out, but think about rotating the folks through. There's one other major benefit here. Most of your development team believes you don't actually know what customers want as a product manager. They won't say it because they're too polite, right? But if you ask them, they will admit to wondering whether you have any clue what real users do. And this is a great way to reinforce for your whole team that if you're a product manager and you're on 1 or 2 calls a week, you actually know what real users say. And it brings you a lot more clout. It brings you a lot more believability in those discussions, because subliminally everybody remembers that you really do talk to customers. Go.
Okay, thanks, Rich. So just a question from Samit, and and I think it's more of a comment, but what if in terms of still, you need PO as PM cannot be everywhere, breaking epics into user stories. So
I'll disagree.
Yeah.
You might want to splice that across here, right? I'll disagree. So I believe that breaking up user stories depends on the story, right? And it's a team exercise. It's not a product owner exercise. And let me give you 2 examples. I did some work with a great company out in the San Francisco area called Wind River Systems years ago that does embedded operating systems, right? Linux on a chip, right? And one of the epics we had was because it turns out this goes into a lot of automotive stuff, and Mercedes-Benz had an issue because it would take a second and a half for this Linux on a chip to boot up, and your automatic braking system wouldn't be available for the first second and a half, which was dangerous, right? So the request was, it's got to boot up off the chip 5 times faster, right? Now, I wrote the epic that said, make this boot up off the chip 5 times faster. And then the team looked at me and said, okay, we want you to break it into 50 user stories. And I rejected. I said, no, the 2 people in the room who should break this into user stories are the 2 folks who are our architects who know the most about performance engineering, right? Because they knew the answer, right? If we have a user story that's about workflow that's deep in design and user interface, then maybe the designers are going to do the breakup of the user story, right? If it's a payment issue, maybe we have somebody on the team who knows more about the payment processing than anybody else, and they do the user story right. This is not one role does all things. This is a team that collaborates. And if we're thinking of it that way, then sometimes the product manager breaks it down, and sometimes somebody else does. And sometimes it doesn't need to be broken down because everybody knows how to do it, right? So rather than have this sort of procedural thing where product managers write epics and product owners break them into user stories and then bring them to developers, no. I have a team full of smart folks who want to solve this, right? Let's get in a room with a whiteboard or the COVID equivalent and figure it out, and whoever's smartest gets the answer first. Okay, we got one more. I think I can go late, but I think we only have time for one more.
Yeah, we've only got time for one more. We have a bunch more, so we'll take the last one here. So,
okay,
what advice would you give to someone moving from a traditional PO role into a broader PM role, as you describe it?
So we describe both a lot of business strategic needs and a lot of soft skills here. So the 2 things, broad categories. One is I would probably send that person off to a bunch of soft skill building. Anybody who hasn't been through Myers-Briggs or a similar sort of personality thing. Anybody who doesn't understand how salespeople think versus marketing people think versus finance people think. You've got to really understand how your company works and how people are motivated and paid, or you can't be a product manager, right? And then the other one is you have to really understand the go-to-market. You have to understand how things get sold, how we make money, what's the economics of your product, how does it get installed, if we're going to upgrade or end of life, how's that going to work? You have to live in your customer's shoes, right? Not secondhand, not fourth hand. Those are the 2 things that if you're in a narrow traditional product owner role, somebody else does, and they often don't do it right. So those are the 2, and you can go back to my little 3-lobe chart, right? It's all on the right side. How do we get out from under our sales and marketing team and discover what's true in the world for our users? And then when we're agile, we end up building the right things.
Okay, so Rich, Rich, thanks so much. I think we could ask questions for another hour here, but really appreciate it. And again, really enjoyed the talk. Thanks so much again for your time. And just if anyone wants to follow up anywhere, they can reach you.
Well, if you're clever enough to put my email address,
or where they can find out more about you.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to share here for a moment to do that. So let's share the screen. Window. Here we go. Here's how to find me. There we go. Right. So anybody who it's a hard name to spell, but once you get the name right, everything else follows. There's 20 years of blogs. Help yourself. There's 100 talks.